Hey kids, it's Jurassic James, and this Jurassic James Explains, we're looking at Dakosaurus. So I actually only have two models here, and the first one comes from the Safari Tube. So if you go to Amazon or was it Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you can actually see little tuber marine reptiles. This guy's in there. So this is my first Dakosaurus figure, but it's very tiny and it's very, you can't quite see all the features. But then I received this PNSO model, and the idea with PNSO is normally I review Safari, Carnegie, Papo, Schlee, those main companies, Mojo occasionally. This is a new company for me. They do more like refined, more expensive models. So I'm trying out something new here. But first and foremost, we're gonna open it up. And the box, it has Paulwin the Dakosaurus. So that's kind of weird to me that they named them, but whatever your brand is. But like, I prefer that it's not like Danny the Dakosaurus or Amy the Embargosaurus. It's still like a different name. I don't know what they determined for that. Anyway. So let's see, if we open it, we have this, and so first and foremost, you receive, a poster. So that is a poster of Dakosaurus. You can see what it looks like. Looks just like a toy, actually, as one would expect. And then there's a little booklet, and it's, I am Paulwin the Dakosaurus. And there's pictures of him, I guess, and skull reconstructions. That's really cool. Their nostrils only have they have one nares hole. They get confused, kind of have some fun information about the animals. That's really kind of cool. But at the main event itself, we have the animals. So we take off this upper plastic, which is just the best for the environment. And here it is, right here. So let's see, here we have, very cool. So one thing to point out with the stance is that I know I've always complained about dinosaur toy model tails being too short because you're trying to fit them in a box. Obviously this pose is making it more condensed for the box to be smaller, but it's an actual cool pose because it's, mammals, dolphins and otters, we swim like this. Reptiles and fish swim like this. So this guy having this kind of twisted turn look, that's really kind of cool. Another thing to point out too is that the jaws articulate, opens and closes, and has full flippers, and the tail. Now, when you look at an ichthyosaur or a plesiosaur, I did a whole video on marine reptiles. I'll put it in the description below, a link to it. What we see is that the lower part of the tail is where the bones are, and the part going up like this is like cartilage to give it more power when swimming. In my vertebrate zoology class, we talked about fish and their different tail designs and how they swim and all that, and this is what great white sharks have. It's the best for quick speed, right? One thing to point out too with this guy is you don't see these huge armor scales you see in his relatives, the crocodiles, because we actually found some of their relatives, some of their closer marine crocodile relatives without the large armor in the back. Speaking of that, who is his family? Technically, Dakosaurus is a marine reptile. So that group includes the plesiosaurs, the ichthyosaurs, and the mosasaurs, right? But even within these groups, we have different branches. So, for example, the plesiosaur, ichthyosaurs are closer together. The mosasaurs are closer to snakes and lizards, and Dakosaurus is closer to crocodiles, actually. So when you look at this guy, you're looking at it, you're saying whose closest relatives are. It's actually Caprosuchus and modern crocs. Now, again, it is not these guys. It's just closer to them than it is to these guys. You say, wait a minute, why is it in the ocean? Well, crocs have had a very diverse evolution. In fact, I had a good question on my tour once where someone was like, there are crocodiles in the Mesozoic, and dinosaurs died out, and we have crocs today, dinosaurs. Which the question is technically flawed because dinosaurs are birds, so they are still here. But the main thing was the majority of dinosaurs died out in the Cretaceous period. Crocs survived. And I pointed out to the guests that it turns out crocs almost did die out. Only a few small ones survived, and those led to what we have today. But crocodiles are very diverse, the archosaur, that branch, in the fact that Dakosaurus is in the ocean with flippers. There are some with actual, real full fingers, but they had webbing. There's some that can gallop, for example, this guy from South America. And in fact, I'm going to link below as well. I have an updated archosaur page, archosaur morph page. So I'm going to show you how all the crocs break down in a family tree, if you're into that kind of thing. But in general, you're seeing where it fits in. Now, is it alone? And the answer is no. There are other members of this group. So this is a Plesiosuchus. So for example, the name Plesio, the plesiosaurus means similar to lizard or like lizard or The idea is that Plesiosaurus is a reptile, but it's not quite like another lizard, so the flippers. These guys, Plesiosuchus means like croc. Suchus means croc. So you see how they all have like these like finger-like structure you can see there. That's because when you see fins on dolphins and turtles and things, they have a whole hand there. The ancestors on land of all vertebrates had 5 digits, and they've lost them since then. And the idea, or like horses have 1, for example, or we kept them all and modified them. Well, in this situation here, where these guys did the same thing as the other marine reptiles, where their ancestors would have been on the beach and then beach combing, and then some of them would have ventured more into the water and hunted for fish and things. And the ones who had better webbing would have survived and eaten better, had offspring. Their children would have had better swimming abilities. The ones that didn't do as well. So the idea is that nature was selecting for having webbed feet, and eventually became a flipper. You say, well, how did that work? It happens a lot, actually. In mammals, it's funny because in mammals we have cetaceans, which are dolphins and whales, and they're one branch basically, and their closest relatives are hippos, genetically speaking. Then we have things like otters and seals, and they're closer to dogs basically, and bears, and they went into the ocean. And then of course we have manatees, which are actually closer to elephants. So we have these 3 major groups of mammals that gave their own marine version of their family, right? So the same thing happens with marine reptiles, where the Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus are on one branch, the crocs are on one branch, and then the Mosasaurus are on a different branch. But even if looking at Plesiosuchus and compare it to Mosasaur, it looks very similar. I mean, the toys are both very similar, colored and patterned. But the idea here is very simple. There are 2 species of Dakosaurus that are recognized. The one in Europe is called Dakosaurus maximus. And I think that's what this guy is, because they have more elongated snouts. Whereas the species in Argentina is called Dakosaurus andiensis, so it has more of a shorter, blunter snout. And in fact, the Dakosaurus from Europe, the maximus, is from late Jurassic. This guy's from the latest Jurassic, early Cretaceous period. So we're seeing possibly one species evolving to another. But remember, again, they're from different parts of the world. But the main thing to point out is Mosasaurs show up at the late Cretaceous period. So these guys die out before Mosasaurs show up. So if you look at their very similar appearance, you're like, yeah, they probably, like, again, these didn't evolve to them. They're different branches. And we determine that by morphology. If you have, like, different animals today, you can do DNA tests and say, okay, these animals are closely related. But in fossil record, there's no DNA, despite what you see in movies. The idea is very simple. We look at the structure of these animals. So we compare Dakosaurus, internally has more in common with this crocodile than it would with the plesiosaur, even though they both have flippers, basically. So it's using the morphology, the shape of the animal. Well, with the plesiosaurs, they have very similar morphology, but if you look at their family trees, this guy's closer to a Komodo dragon, this guy to a Nile crocodile. So they have similar body plans because they are in the same environment. And that's called convergent evolution. So that's why it's such an important example of this. Now, that being said, last thing to point out here is how do we get more Dakosauruses, right? And the idea is that, well, we think the plesiosaurs, like sea turtles, could crawl out to the beach and lay eggs. We think their ancestors had actual hands, could were like seals. But with Dakosaurus having flippers, we think they're more like the Ichthyosaurs. Their flippers mean they can't go on land, because if they do, they're stuck, they're beached. And this Ichthyosaur is giving birth, his little baby right there coming out. And we think what's going on is that despite being reptiles, they may have made eggs inside of them, and the eggs would have hatched inside. You say, that's kind of weird. Well, great white sharks, sharks do that, and also rattlesnakes. So you'll see the mother snake and the babies are crawling out of it, and you're like, isn't it a reptile? Shouldn't it be eggs? The eggs are on the inside, basically. So with this animal not being able to go on land, it will probably give birth in the ocean, which is kind of weird, but not uncommon within this grouping, basically. That being said, I hit all the major points. There's always more information to go over, but I want to show you the story of Dakosaurus, because this is a really cool little figure. And, again, it's showing you all kind of great traits. And what I like about it is, and I hope you enjoy this in the video, is that by showing you what it means, what's going on, the teeth, because, last thing to point out, the teeth here, what made it special is that when it was first named in 1856, the teeth were considered, they were considered a mosasaur, because in early paleontology, Megalosaurus was the actual first predatory dinosaur named and understood. So for like 100 years, many animals they find and they weren't sure they fit in. They're like, Megalosaurus, right? It became a wastebaxic taxon. Well, the idea is that this guy's teeth in alignment aren't quite like other crocs. So they're actually more like a dinosaur. So we're thinking where the other relatives, the very narrow snouts, like this guy and Metriorhinus, the very narrow gripping snouts, this guy had more crushing blow like a dinosaur. So again, you're seeing this convergent evolution, not to be a dinosaur, but this kind of crushing attack, like meaning theropod dinosaurs, despite being a croc relative. That being said, we are done with the video, and I've been told by YouTube, they email me every week to tell you that as the boxes pop up around me, to let you know to subscribe and like and share. And if you have a subject you want to talk about or questions, please put it in the comments. I enjoy looking at that and seeing what you guys want to know. That being said, I'll see you guys later, and thank you for tuning in.